Welcome to the Brain People Podcast, a show where four mental health experts team up to bring you practical tools for overcoming mental health challenges. The Brain People don't replace your doctor or therapist, but we will give you some extra tools to help you on your journey. So join us as we fight mental illness, one episode at a time.
Welcome, everyone, to the Brain People Podcast. My name is Dr. Katie Elsen. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and joining me is
Dr. Daniel Binus, psychiatrist.
Yes, and I just want to start off by saying I'm so grateful for the Brain People Podcast. Are you grateful for the Brain People Podcast?
Super grateful. I look forward to this time all the time. It's just such a great time to think about mental health and to share. And I get excited just thinking about all the people that are listening and enriched by the information that we've been given.
Yes, and I noticed that you're smiling as you're talking about this, right? And of course, this has something to do with our episode. Today, we're going to be talking about gratitude, right? The things that we are grateful for and emphasizing the importance of gratitude for our mental health. Now, some of our viewers or listeners might be thinking, oh, but we just passed Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving's already passed. But so why are we talking about gratitude?
Well, I think it's important for all of our viewers and myself included to remember that gratitude is not just an event that happens once a year and we remember things that we're thankful for, but really it should be something that we cultivate throughout the year. And I think it's super important to realize that gratitude is one of the key factors for optimal mental health. And frankly, I think without a regular practice of gratitude, people are not going to have optimal mental health.
Yeah, so it's not just a holiday, right? It's really a lifestyle, how we can cultivate gratitude as a lifestyle.
Exactly.
So maybe let's start with the basics. So what is gratitude? Because I think maybe we don't cultivate it because we don't fully understand what gratitude is.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, gratitude actually comes from the root Latin word gratia. And gratia actually means grace, graciousness, or gratefulness. And it kind of depends on the context, but basically, when you really think about gratitude, it really encompasses all of these words in one respect or another. And it really has to do with focusing on something that we've received from outside of ourselves that we're thankful for, and we're showing appreciation for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love how Dr. Emmons, he wrote a book called Thanks, right? And he's one of the leading researchers. He says that there's two main components. There's the affirmation of the goodness, right? Seeing that there is goodness. And then the acknowledgement that that goodness, a lot of it comes outside of yourself, right? And I love that because it's not just, I think sometimes oversimplify gratitude and just say, oh, I'm grateful, I'm thankful. But it goes beyond. It's this deep process of really thinking intentionally about what we're grateful for and what is the source of that gratitude.
That's a really good point. And I love that element of gratitude because we see that also in the research too, that gratitude is amazing at connecting us with things beyond ourselves. Because, and I think in this world, it's so easy to get focused on ourselves, like, my needs and what I want. And, it really self-centered sort of society and way of being. And a lot of it is survival because people are highly stressed. And so it's easy to get focused on that. But gratitude really transcends that and says, no, you know what? I realize that I need things outside of myself. And when I receive them, I'm going to take time to actually notice. And so that can be, of course, being grateful to other people, but it can also be connecting us and being grateful to a higher power, to God, for the gifts that he gives us as well.
Yes. And I like that you said, take time. It's like little stop signs in our lives to just pause. Because if you think about it, I can't be grateful in a very fast-paced life. I need to pause and acknowledge the gifts that I'm receiving.
Absolutely. And I think when we do that, it actually helps us to really cope with the stressors, and it helps everything to kind of slow down. And in reality, it's probably one of the best kind of grounding techniques that
Mhm.
we could use to slow down when we intentionally practice it.
Yeah. So we've talked about what is gratitude, but let's talk a little bit more about the benefits because some people might be thinking, of course, yeah, gratitude is great, but we really want to sell them on this, right? Because we know the benefits. And I hope that people can walk away from this episode and be like, I want to practice a lifestyle of gratitude. So, what are some of the benefits of gratitude?
Well, generally speaking, people that are grateful are more happy if they practice gratitude consistently, and they're also more relationally connected and they're less stressed. And so I think those factors are very important. And I'm just thinking about one study that I was looking at earlier, and it's a very interesting study. A lot of the gratitude research has been done by Dr. Emmons at UC Davis and Dr. McCullough at the University of Miami. And they did one study where they had participants basically write a few sentences about their week, and they did that. And basically they had one group wrote about things that they were grateful for that occurred during the week. The second group wrote about the irritations, the things that really got on their nerves. And then the third wrote about events that had affected them, but there was really no emphasis on whether they had to be positive or negative. And so they did this for 10 weeks. And what they found after 10 weeks is that those that had the gratitude assignment were more optimistic and they felt a lot better about their lives. But what I thought was really interesting and actually surprised the researchers is that they actually tended to exercise more and they had less visits to medical professionals as well. And so we can see that gratitude, obviously, it helps us feel better, be more positive and optimistic, but also it even affects us physically as well.
Yeah, so there's a ripple effect. It doesn't just make me feel good for the moment, which often we think about gratitude just in the moment, but it really impacts different areas of our lives and even our physical health.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about, the exercise piece, one of the elements that actually makes it difficult for people to exercise is a lack of motivation. And
Mm.
so I'm thinking I'm just hypothesizing here. I'm guessing that gratitude somehow actually can help to increase people's motivation for doing positive things. And so it's
Mm.
like almost this upward spiral that can start to take place.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, some people might be thinking, oh, well, I don't write down my irritations. But for me, when I think about whether in my personal life or with my clients, the equivalent might be venting, right? It's the time that you're spending and what are you spending that time on? Are you spending thinking or talking about things you're grateful for? Or are you venting and focusing on the irritations of life?
That's very true. And I know it's so easy for us to automatically go to the negative. And somehow for most people, it's almost like water goes downhill, and it's just like it's so easy to go to that negative place. But gratitude, we have to be more intentional with it, and it does take work. But I think like anything, when we work at something that's good and can be helpful, it helps us feel better, even though it is more work.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it does take time, but it definitely pays off in the
Yeah.
end.
And one thing to probably clarify is gratitude is not seeing the negative, right? Because a lot of people see the negative because of their past experiences and trying to it's very adaptive, right? If I look for the negative, maybe I can prevent it or control it or address it somehow. So gratitude is not this false positivity where I'm being grateful for things and I'm avoiding what's possible dangerous or any negative in my life. It's you can acknowledge it, but it's really what am I choosing to cultivate?
Absolutely. And I really like that because it it reminds us, I mean, what comes to my mind is the idea that even in the most difficult of circumstances, we shouldn't live in denial and be like, "Oh, everything's fine."
Mm,
But as we cultivate healthy gratitude, we can believe that good can still come out
mm,
of difficult situations. And that's why we can be grateful. And
mm,
ultimately, I think, especially when you have a belief, a spiritual belief, a belief in God, then it's easier to have that sense of gratitude because you're trusting, like, okay, even though I don't understand this and maybe I don't like it, I can still be grateful that good can come out of it. And it reminds me of, I read this quote that says, when you can't see God's hand, trust his heart.
Mm.
And so there's that idea there's like, okay, I can still be grateful, even though I might not be grateful for this particular thing. I can be grateful in it, and it makes me think there's this verse actually in First Thessalonians chapter 5 that says, be grateful in all things. It doesn't say be grateful for all things,
Mm.
but be grateful in all things. And so I think, as we trust that God can bring good out of it, that helps.
Yeah. You can probably think about individuals that you know that have that attitude, right? No matter what they're going through, they have something that they can hold on to, something that they can be grateful for. And it's amazing. It's inspiring, really, because it's not easy.
No, it's not at all. I mean, I was thinking about the story of Corrie Ten Boom. Some of our listeners might be familiar with her, but she was alive during World War II, and she and her family helped to house many of the Jews that were escaping Nazi Germany because of persecution. And and so she and her sister and her whole family actually ended up going into the concentration camps themselves. Well, it was terrible quarters. I mean, dirty and just musty and flea infested. And yet they were believers. And they read in the Bible, they read that verse in First Thessalonians 5 that we need to be grateful in all things. And Corey told her sister, she's like, but we can't be thankful because with these fleas and everything. And her sister, bless her heart, she was like, no, the Bible says we have to be thankful. So they did. They said, okay, we're gonna thank God even about the fleas. And so they did. And it was amazing because not that long after, her sister actually found out that one of the reasons they had so much freedom in their bunker there, or their quarters there in the concentration camp, and the guards didn't bother them too much, is because there were so many fleas.
Wow.
And so, of course, they weren't happy for the flea bites and that sort of thing, but they were able to see how God used the fleas so that they could have more freedom to live their lives and to do things that were good.
Yeah, I love that story, right? Because none of us would think, oh, definitely to be grateful for fleas,
Right.
but it took time to be able to recognize that, right? They trusted,
Yes.
but it took time to finally recognize the blessings of that circumstance.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't think that, and that story is a good example too of how, gratitude often doesn't come natural to us. And Corey was like, "Oh, no, can't do it." But when she did it intentionally, even though she maybe didn't feel the emotion right away, later on when she realized what was actually happening, the emotion came, and it was almost like gratitude by faith sort of thing.
Yes, definitely. I like that. Gratitude by faith. And some of our viewers or listeners, we might just encourage them to start trying to be grateful, even if we don't convince them by the end of this episode that it's something that's beneficial to them, maybe to just start practicing it.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what I've tried to do in my life too, because, you're like, can this really help that much? But as you practice and you really will start seeing the benefits. And it actually does get easier with time. At first, it can be kind of like annoying and just like, why am I doing this? You feel like you're going through the motions. It's not really making a difference, but over time it does.
Yeah. Now, are there any other benefits that you want to highlight before we start talking about how to cultivate gratitude?
Yeah. The other aspect that I think is super important to understand is that gratitude actually sets the stage for deeper relational connection. And they did one study, for example, that where they had couples that took the time to express gratitude for their partner. And what they found is that the couples then felt more positive toward one another, and they felt more comfortable expressing concerns about their relationship with each other, which I thought was really interesting because it shows that gratitude actually can help people feel more safe with each other. When they're expressing that gratitude, it brings about a sense of connection. I'm certain that there must be oxytocin that's involved. And so as you do that, then you feel safer with that person, you feel connected, and it opens you up in a healthy way.
Mm. That's powerful coming from like a clinician's perspective, right? We might often focus on conflict resolution and trying to address the conflict, but just knowing that by investing in cultivating gratitude in a relationship, that naturally, like it's a byproduct, that then you're able to express those concerns more openly and then resolve them as well.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there because essentially what's happening is that you shift the thinking and the way of being from more conflict oriented, like I'm going to win this argument or I'm going to show how I'm correct and I'm going to use the right way of doing it, to no, you know what? We're a team and we're going to work through this together.
Yeah.
And I think that team mentality makes it so much easier to actually resolve conflict, to work through difficult things.
Yeah. So we see kind of intrapersonal benefits, right? Within myself, being more positive, being happier, even resulting in exercise and fewer physician visits. But then we also see, right, interpersonal benefits of building relationships, strengthening those bonds. And so it's beautiful. It's really kind of both for ourselves and for our relationships around us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the research really supports those relationships with gratitude and love, as well as gratitude and interpersonal trust. And I think those things all belong together. And again, when we think about how that can then affect our ability to deal with stress and the difficult things in life, because one of the biggest things that the research shows when we're dealing with stress is that when we have a sense of connection, we're not alone. That this actually allows us to handle almost anything.
Yeah.
And so when we start to unpack it, we realize that gratitude, in a way, is kind of like almost a gateway. Um, a, a gateway practice, if you will, or a gateway, what's the word I'm looking for, where, it's something you do on a regular basis. Yeah, it's a discipline. That's the word. A gateway discipline to so many other positive benefits.
Yeah. I was thinking about a couple of clients recently who've expressed that they've been able to be more grateful towards individuals that have hurt them in the past.
Hmm,
And so when you were talking about gateway, I was thinking of gratitude can often be a gateway to forgiveness.
that's true.
And that we know that there are many benefits to forgiveness, but thinking about whether it was a parent, right, that hurt you in the past or someone else, we may not agree with what happened, right? It may have been very hurtful, but knowing that you could still be grateful even in very terrible circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's a lot to that because it's easy not only to focus on the negative aspects of our lives and what's going on, but it's also easy to focus on the things we don't like about people or how they've hurt us. But when we actually take the time to be grateful for people and realize that even in people that have hurt us, maybe there's some good qualities or maybe there's some good things that have come out. Again, I think that can help with forgiveness, like you're saying, and also with a bonding element. And of course, we need to be careful if someone's hurt us and they're not safe
Mhm.
to form that relationship to. I'm not saying that you should just, forgive and forget and
Mhm.
trust them.
Mhm.
So there's that element of safety, but being grateful overall, I think, really can set the stage for that.
Yeah. I love this quote. It says, your psychological well being depends less on the things that happen to you and more on the things you pay attention to. Gratitude will shift your brain's attention. This is from Dr. Korb, who's the author of The Upward Spiral, as you mentioned before, using neuroscience to reverse the course of depression, one small change at a time. So
Hmm.
gratitude allows us to shift, right, our attention to things. So we could see both the negative and the positive, but it's choosing to shift our attention.
Yeah. And some people talk about our attention being kind of like a spotlight. And so that's really what it does, right? It shifts the spotlight from being on the dark things that we don't necessarily want to think about because they're not making us so happy, to the things that are brighter and more positive. And again, it doesn't mean that we're ignoring that maybe we're going through some difficulties, but it's inspiring us with a sense of hope and realizing that even though there's some hard things, there's a lot of really good things in my life too.
Mhm.
And I know for me, even when 5 or 10% of my life is hard, 90% is still really good, but it's
But
so
often the
easy.
spotlight's on the 5 to 10%.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how can we shift that attention? How can we start cultivating gratitude?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few different ways to do that. I mean, obviously, doing a gratitude journal, I mean, that's a pretty classic suggestion that a lot of people talk about and actually practice. And I think it can be a really helpful one. But if you're like me, sometimes I'll start writing a gratitude journal and then I'm just not, it's hard for me to be really regular with it. And I feel strongly about gratitude. I really believe it's something that ideally we should try to practice every day. And there
Throughout the
may,
day.
yeah, exactly, throughout the day. And so I like to find even simpler ways. So sure, a gratitude journal can be great, just writing for things that you're grateful for. And by the way, one time I had a patient who shared this with me, and I thought it was really amazing. And he said, I'm starting to not just write down the things that I'm grateful for, but why I'm
Mm.
grateful for that. And I thought that was really neat because that opens up then other things you're grateful for. For example, if I say, well, I'm grateful because I have a car. Well, why? Because it allows me to go to work, and that allows me to help people, and I really enjoy that, and I'm grateful that I get to help people and work with people. And so it really helps open up to other things that we can be grateful for too. So yeah, gratitude journal is a great way, but there's other even simpler ways if you're not ready to maybe start there. I know one simple way is just to start associating gratitude with something you do every day. For
Mm.
example, maybe when you brush your teeth in the morning, or if you don't do it in the morning, I mean, you're supposed to. um, whenever you brush your teeth for the day, you can practice saying, every time I brush my teeth, I want to remember at least two things that I'm grateful for. And that's a simple way because you brush your teeth every day, hopefully, at least once. and then you're associating that behavior with something you do anyway.
Mm. Yeah, and one thing that I like to add to that, both related to the why, but it's to be very specific with what you're saying. And I say that because often we do this. We say, I'm so grateful for family. I'm so grateful for a car, for work, right? These very big categories.
Hmm.
That doesn't train our brain to really see the details in life. So, one of the challenges I give my clients is if you're going to do gratitude journal, they have to be different things every single day. You can never repeat yourself. Never. And so, for example, that might, instead of saying I'm grateful for family, that might say, today I was talking with my sister and, she said this one thing and it just meant so much to me. Most likely your sister won't say the exact same thing the next day. So it's being very specific. And that's training your brain to find the details in your life that you're grateful for.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think it's so easy to make these generalizations, but it's much less likely to actually really foster more of those positive emotions and a deeper appreciation for why you really are grateful for that person or that thing or that flower or whatever it is. Cause you might be like, oh, yeah, I'm grateful for flowers. Well, what is it about and which flower and
Mhm.
and why and all of this? And then it really starts to bring up, it becomes much more experiential.
Mhm.
And I think it's almost like for our emotions to engage, we have to have more of an experience rather than just kind of this logical, like, okay, I'm going to go through the motions and do it. And it's like, okay, that might help some, but if you really want to get the benefit, then make it more holistic.
It's kind of like what you were mentioning before with grounding, right? The way to really ground properly is to really intensify the experience.
Hmm.
What do I see? What do I smell? What do I touch, etc. And the same thing for flowers, right? What am I grateful for? What are the smell, the intricate colors and the shapes, and going into much detail helps deepen the experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Another way that people actually often experience a lot of gratitude is actually through prayer. Prayer and meditation can be a wonderful way to just really connect with God's heart and just stop, because sometimes we pray and we say, okay, God, I want this and this, but how often do we really spend time really specifically, especially since we're talking about, specifics, just saying like, wow, God, I'm really grateful for you, and I'm grateful not just because you're God and you're way up there in the sky or whatever, because of the specific things that you're doing in my life, because of the specific character attributes of who I knew you to be, then we start getting more into that experience of who God is. And it's a much more relational aspect. Because I could tell my wife, for example, like, yeah, I'm grateful for you. But it's a lot more meaningful if I tell her, like, I'm grateful because you take the time to, care for our children, and you take the time to pay attention to what I really need and desire, and that you care about, like, what food I like, and little things.
Mhm.
But that really enriches the
Mm.
experience.
Both for you and for your wife.
That's right.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about gratitude. It is such a two-way street, especially when it takes place in the context of a relationship. And sure, we can do it, do the gratitude journal and all of that. But I think it really multiplies the joy when we share our
Yes.
gratitudes. When we take the time to actually, whether it's sharing it with God or sharing it with other people. And I've noticed this even in church too. Like, it's really interesting because in our church, it's a really small church, and so we have a time of sharing prayer requests and gratitudes. And at first, people are often kind of like, there's one hand, but then someone starts sharing something they're grateful for, and like, oh, this happened this week, and I was blessed this way. And then it's like suddenly you see all these hands.
It's
It's
contagious.
contagious, right? And I think we need to practice having these seasons of gratitude, with our friends and with our family, and really making it, even though it sounds almost kind of ritualistic and mechanic, it's not. Like, it starts to feel like really spontaneous in the moment, and a lot of joy.
I used to have a time with where I used to work where we'd come together, and before we started any meeting, we would do accolades. What are we grateful for one another? What are the praises of one another? And it really bonded us. And I remember just that practice alone, knowing that Friday was coming and we would have a time to mention these things. I would be thinking about it throughout the week, right? And so I think that also applies to for us, right? When we're intentional about being grateful, then we're thinking actively about it throughout the day or throughout the week.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're making me think, maybe we should try that in our here
Yeah.
too, because that could be something to look forward to. And so I think having certain times of the week and of course times of the day is a wonderful way to practice gratitude.
Now, another thing to consider is that the benefits of gratitude are not always immediately apparent, right? So, some research shows that it can even take up to 4 to 12 weeks. And so, I think that's just an encouragement for our viewers and our listeners to, as you start practicing, right? It's kind of like when you start going to the gym, right? You may not see the benefits right away, but to keep at it, because what's amazing is not only can it take up, to 12 weeks, but the benefits are long lasting. There's some research studies that show that they had them write gratitude letters, just a one time thing, and it lasted up to 6 months, the benefits of gratitude. So maybe you might have a slow start. You might feel the benefits right away. Great. But if not, we want to encourage you to keep on keeping on.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's so important. And again, even though at first, if you're not used to being grateful, it might feel really mechanical and like, oh, this isn't doing anything. If you hang in there, it gets easier, and you'll start to see that benefit. And pretty soon, it's going to be second nature.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, hey, I'm just tending to actually look for the positive. And that becomes really exciting when you start realizing, like, oh, wow, I'm looking for the positive in people and the positive even in difficult situations. And it really changes the way that you live your life. And interestingly enough, people actually will want to be around you more because I don't know about you, Katie, but when I'm around positive people, I'm like, yeah, I want to be around that person more
Hmm.
because it's so nice. But when the opposite is also true, right?
Yeah. Now, thinking about, we're wanting people to start cultivating gratitude from here moving forward, right? But also, I was thinking about with the holiday season, we can also kind of look back to individuals or experiences that we've had and be grateful for those as well, and then take time to express it. So I mentioned that because maybe you haven't been as grateful for things in the past. And you can still go to that person during Christmas and say, I was just thinking about the X thing that you did. And I just want to say that I'm really grateful for that. Right? That's powerful. Something that maybe, that person wished they could have heard from you before, but being intentional, not just about the things to be grateful for of what happens today or in the future, but even things that have happened in the past.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And it reminds me of a study they actually did for where people forgot to, or they didn't thank someone that they should have. And then they wrote a thank you card and gave it to them. And in the study, they saw immediate results like of
Mm.
happiness because those people, well, I'm guessing that they were, it was almost like kind of course, they were happy to see the other person happy. There was probably kind of a relief, like I should have thanked them before, but I didn't.
Mm.
And so it really multiplied their happiness.
Yeah.
And it really reminds me of what I call sometimes the three phases of gratitude, which is, we can be grateful for things from the past. We can be grateful for things in the present. And then we can also be grateful for things in the future. And especially, when we have that belief in a God that loves us and cares, then we can be confident in the future and know that good is in store for us.
So, any takeaways for our viewers and our listeners for today?
Well, I would say the takeaway is really gratitude leads to better relationships. It leads to more happiness. It really leads to the capacity to feel a deeper and richer sense of your world and life really. And yeah, it doesn't always come naturally for us, but take the time to be intentional, cultivate gratitude. There's many different ways to do that, and in the end you'll find yourself a lot happier, healthier, and your relationships will be better too.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that as kind of a challenge for our viewers and listeners, whether it's a gratitude journal, whether it's something more personal or a thank you card, a gratitude letter, a gratitude visit, whatever it may be, start practicing gratitude. And I'm not always 100% confident on things, but this is something I'm confident about that if they start, they will see benefits.
Absolutely. And I like what you said earlier, ideally even throughout the day. And that's where sometimes in the morning it's easier for me to be grateful. And so then I try to remind myself, okay, three things 3 times a day is kind of a good mantra for me. And I'm like, okay, if I remember at noon and then the evening, so that can keep you in that more positive mindset throughout the day.
So we'll just close by saying we are grateful for you all watching, right? And we hope to see you next episode.
Yes, we are very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To hear more episodes, find us on social media, or support us financially, visit thebrainpeoplepodcast.com.